Hey, what's up, everybody? Garrett Grumley here with Duty to Train. I wanted to follow up on my last video, and I was talking about I came up, and this is going to be a little bit graphic, real quick. Just want to let you know, but I saw a video. Let's just jump right into this. But there was a statistic about Mr. Kelly, who was in the Air Force, was convicted of assaulting his wife and breaking his infant stepson's skull. In Airman First Class, he was sentenced 12 months in confinement and a reduction to the lowest possible rank. Now, I don't know, like maybe all the stats aren't here because frankly, it seems like if you break your infant stepson's skull, I just, I'm going through this in my head right now, but I'm trying to figure out how far can you go and how many terrible things can you do in your life and still own a gun? And I'm curious about this because, you know, I think that if you're convicted of like a nonviolent crime, then that's one thing. But if you're convicted of something like really, really egregious, I don't think you should be able to purchase a firearm. I think that's fair, right? I mean, it has to be like really egregious. But if you're, breaking your infant stepson's skull, now maybe that doesn't mean that he literally like crushed it. Maybe he just like broke his head. But 4 to 5 years later, he passed two background checks and bought two guns. And then a year after that, he killed 26 people and 20 more were wounded at the church shooting in Sutherland Springs. So this is all I'm going to do is just research this guy and see what happened. Kelly. Sutherland Springs church shooting. The court-martialed the man suspected. Authorities were investigating whether he had ties to a militia. They were investigating. I'm sorry, I'm losing like a lot of patience with like these stupid headlines. Authorities were investigating. Okay, were they? And then they decided that he wasn't. Like, was he or was he not? That is the dumbest, stupid. How about the Air Force court-martialed the man suspected of killing 26 people at a Texas church? Or just leave it at who is Devin Kelly, the Texas church shooter? Authorities were investigating whether he had ties to a militia. Whatever. The gunman who turned a Texas church into a shooting gallery had a turbulent and violent past, including a court-martial from the Air Force for fracturing his baby stepson's skull, an animal cruelty arrest, and a habit of harassing ex-girlfriends. He was very sick in the head. Toting authorities described as an assault-type rifle. This bothers me. Assault-type rifle. You know what you can assault somebody with? Your fists. You know what you can assault somebody with? A revolver, which was made literally 200 years ago. I hate that term. However, credit where it's due. Very effective. Very effective. Okay. He opened fire, killing 26 people, at least a dozen of them children. Good Lord. Who was behind this act of carnage? I am numb. My family will suffer because of his coward actions. I am so sorry for the victims in Texas. Two ex-girlfriends told NBC News that Kelly stalked them after breakups. Okay, so what I'm trying to do, and I'm just going to look into this real quick, but how far can you go and then still own a gun in America? I would be open to like hearing debates about this on both sides. But the way that I fall right now is like if you get convicted of like a really egregious, violent crime, I think it would be fair to say that you never get the right to own another weapon. You're just not trustworthy. I think that's fair. but let's just see. Can balance. Oh my God. Okay. So Seth Oken. Okay. This is what we did last time. How stuff works. The idea that society's vilest criminals should not only suffer punishment, but also forfeit civil rights enjoys a long pedigree. Pre-1870 England, a declaration of civiliter mortis, or civil death, meant exactly what it sounded like. Certain criminals, including traitors, felons, exiles, and outlaws, were, in the eyes of the law, as good as dead. A version of civil death survives in American law as civil disabilities, through which offenders can be legally barred from such privileges as entering into certain agreements, holding public office, obtaining some jobs and licenses, or profiting from insurance or pensions. Disabilities can also extend to civil rights, including the right to vote, to serve on a jury, or to keep and bear arms. Okay. Federal law bans convicted felons from possessing firearm. Okay. As spelled out in Chapter 44 of the Title 18 of the United States Code, federal law bans convicted felons from possessing firearms or ammunition. Sounds straightforward enough, but when you unpack how that federal law works and factor in the complexities added by state laws and high court rulings, a much more complicated picture begins to emerge. According to Section 922, no one who has been convicted in any court of a crime punishable by imprisonment for a term exceeding 1 year may own or possess a gun. This rule covers all felonies, but does not apply. Okay, so I wouldn't agree with that, right? Like if you have like a felony, let's look up most common felonies. Drug crimes, you're selling some pot, especially, like definitely not. Violent crimes, theft, sex crimes. Okay, let's look up felonies.org. There's a whole website called felonies.org. Okay, let's look up drug abuse. What quantity of drugs? Okay, being found guilty of a felony drug charge usually results in a prison sentence of longer than a year, as well as a hefty fine. Okay, so drugs, arson. Committing arson means willfully destroying someone's personal property by lighting it on fire. Generally, when you think of arson on someone's home. However, the threshold for arson is a piece of personal property worth a minimum of $150. So, we guess it would just depend. And maybe that's why these laws, when you break all these things down, it just becomes very complicated because, when you go to like write these laws, it becomes very difficult to say, oh, everybody who's convicted of a felony shouldn't own a firearm because, you could be a dumb 22-year-old kid, right? You'd also be a dumb 38-year-old man, or a dumb 45-year-old woman. But, especially like if you're a dumb 22-year-old kid and you're having a rough patch of life and, I don't know, you go and like, I don't even know, like burn someone's car or something and no one's in it. You just do it. It's stupid in the middle of the night and you got wrapped up in the moment. Like, should you not be able to own a gun 10 years later after you've like paid your dues to society, served time in jail, gone through rehabilitation. Now you have like a wife and 2 kids and you have a job and like you're a contributing member of society and you want to be able to protect your family because maybe you live in a bad part of town. Should you not be able to own a firearm because you burned someone's car like 10 years ago because you maybe got like drunk or high one night and then burned someone's stuff because you were being stupid? No, I don't think so. But disorderly conduct, most often disorderly conduct results in a misdemeanor charge. Supplying alcohol to minors. Well, typically there are times when it can result in severe felony charges. For example, if felony occurs if serious injury or death occurs as a result of supplying alcohol to minors, violent crimes. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so I know that in some, so in some states, I don't know, maybe this is just going to have to be like a little bit of a harder thing to try to nail down. Let's just read this a little bit more. I'm trying to just figure out and determine for my own beliefs and for my own personal opinions, what and how, who should be able to own a firearm if they're considered a felon, and how long after they've finished paying their dues should they be able to own a gun. Obviously, some should be able to, right? if you sold some guns or you sold some like weed or drugs rather, or maybe you sold some guns. I don't think that totally bars you from your right to possess a firearm. It also bans guns for, among others, fugitives, illegal users of controlled substances, mental defectives, undocumented immigrants, dishonorably discharged soldiers, dishonorably discharged soldiers. I didn't know that. Okay. Renounced citizens, subjects of certain court orders, and persons convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence. Violating these statutes can net you 10 years of imprisonment and or a $250,000 fine. Okay. All right. I'll probably just leave it here. These things get like super long, and I just wanted to do a quick, because I kind of mentioned that in the last video, and I guess this is going to require a little bit more research, and I got to get going right now. But yeah, so let's just go back to let's just end with this. Which states allow felons to own guns? Loophole allows some felons to own guns. Okay. Colorado, Kansas, Louisiana, Minnesota, North Carolina, North Dakota, Oregon, and South Dakota automatically restore firearm rights to convicted felons, including those who committed violent crimes, but make them wait 5 to 15 years after they complete state supervision, the center and ATF found. Okay. All right. I think that seems like a good idea, right? Like if you did your time, you did your crime, you served the time, and then depending on the crime, right? They make you wait either 5 to 15 years. If you go 15 years without doing anything else, should you be able to get some of your rights restored, right? Your gun rights restored? I don't think that's unreasonable. Now the downside of that, right? There's always going to be pros and cons. The downside of that is, are some of these people who have perhaps committed a felony before far more likely to commit a felony again? Yes. And will some of them then have guns so that they can commit those felonies? Yes. So there's always going to be pros and cons to all these arguments. But do you think that they shouldn't own any guns as a result of a crime they committed up to 15 years ago, maybe even more than that, because 15, 16, 17, 18 years ago, sometimes court cases, from the time you do the crime to the time you do the time can be like 2 to 3 years. So, if you do a 15, actually it's even after you get out. So I'm thinking, so say you like physically assault somebody. I don't know what the normal sentence would be for that, but say it's like 10 years, 8 years, right? It could take a year, let's say 2 years, so that way it's an even 10. Could take like 10 years for you to like go through the trial, get everything done, do your sentence of 8 years. So it's 2 years to do the trial, 8 years to do the sentence, and then say they make you wait like another 10 years. Like it's 20 years since you assaulted that person that you get your right to own a firearm back. And then if you do try to own a firearm before that time is done, then you end up owing another 10 years up to 250 grand. So yeah, interesting. I don't know, something to think about. I just wanted to have a little bit more information on that, because in the last video, we pointed out where, that guy, I forget his name, who broke his stepson's skull. And I wanted to kind of get a little bit more information so that when, or if somebody ever asked me, should felons own firearms, it depends on the felon. It depends on the amount of time. It depends on, how long. So I don't know, open for discussion, but I don't think all of these videos are going to be open shut cases. You know what I mean? It's going to be things that we need to think about. It's not going to be things that we could just say, oh, this is the answer all of a sudden. A lot of these things take time and takes time to think about. So we will end it there. And until next time, let's just stop this sharing. Stay safe, live free, and I will talk to you later. See ya.